Change is one of the strangest contradictions of the human experience because you can want it with every part of your conscious mind while your brain quietly works against you in the background. You can hate your current situation, feel exhausted by repeating the same patterns, and dream vividly about a different version of your life, yet still find yourself stuck doing the same things day after day. This inner resistance often feels confusing and frustrating, especially when motivation is strong and intentions are clear. You tell yourself that you are ready, that this time will be different, that you finally understand what needs to change, and yet, when it comes time to act, something invisible pulls you back toward the familiar. Procrastination appears, doubt creeps in, energy fades. Suddenly, change feels heavy, overwhelming, or strangely unsafe. This isn't because you're lazy, weak, or incapable. It's because your brain is not designed to prioritize growth or fulfillment. It is designed to prioritize survival. From the brain's perspective, the known is safer than the unknown, even when the known is painful. Familiar discomfort is predictable, and predictability feels like control. The routines, habits, and environments you want to escape are deeply wired into your nervous system, not as preferences, but as reference points for safety. Your brain has learned through repetition that this version of your life has not killed you, and to the survival-oriented parts of your mind, that is enough. Change, on the other hand, represents uncertainty. It introduces new variables, unfamiliar outcomes, and the possibility of failure, rejection, or loss. Even positive change carries risk because it disrupts patterns the brain has spent years optimizing. This is why your brain often reacts to change the same way it reacts to danger, with hesitation, resistance, and emotional friction. You may notice anxiety rising when you think about taking the first step, even if that step logically makes sense. You may feel an urge to delay, distract yourself, or convince yourself that now is not the right time. These reactions are not conscious decisions. They are automatic protective responses designed to keep you within what is known. Over time, this creates a painful gap between who you want to become and what you feel capable of doing. You begin to question yourself, wondering why wanting change so badly doesn't translate into action. You may even internalize this resistance as a personal flaw, telling yourself that something is wrong with you for not following through. But the truth is that your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do: keep you alive, not fulfilled. It does not distinguish between emotional risk and physical danger. To your nervous system, changing careers, ending a relationship, setting boundaries, or redefining your identity can feel just as threatening as stepping into a physically unsafe situation. This is why change often triggers stress responses long before any real danger exists. Your heart races, your thoughts spiral, and your body looks for ways to restore equilibrium by returning to familiar behaviors. Understanding this dynamic is crucial because once you realize that resistance is not proof that change is wrong, but evidence that your brain is trying to protect you, the entire struggle takes on a different meaning. Instead of fighting yourself, you can begin learning how to work with your brain rather than against it. This awareness is the first step toward real change because it shifts the problem from a moral failure to a biological response. And in doing so, it opens the door to compassion, strategy, and sustainable transformation rather than endless self-blame. One of the main reasons your brain resists change is because it is wired to conserve energy, not to constantly reinvent your life. Habits exist because they reduce the amount of conscious effort required to function. Once a behavior becomes familiar, your brain can run it on autopilot, freeing up resources for potential threats. Change interrupts this efficiency. It forces your brain to slow down, pay attention, and make deliberate choices, which requires significantly more energy than repeating what you already know. From a neurological perspective, this extra effort feels costly, even when the outcome promises improvement. This is why starting something new often feels disproportionately hard compared to how simple it looks on the surface. The brain interprets this increased demand as unnecessary strain and responds with resistance. You may experience this as mental fatigue, lack of motivation, or an urge to return to old patterns, not because they are better, but because they are easier. This energy-saving bias explains why people often revert to familiar behaviors during stress. When your nervous system is overloaded, it defaults to what requires the least conscious processing. Even if those behaviors are unhealthy, they are efficient. Over time, this creates a powerful loop where stress reinforces old habits, and old habits maintain the conditions that create stress. Another layer of resistance comes from your brain's relationship with identity. The patterns you want to change are often tied to how you see yourself and how you believe others see you. Your brain strives for internal consistency, and change threatens that consistency by challenging your self-concept. When you attempt to act differently, it can feel inauthentic or uncomfortable, as if you're pretending to be someone you are not. This discomfort isn't evidence that change is wrong. It is evidence that your identity has been shaped by repetition. Your brain has learned to predict your behavior based on past actions, and when you break that pattern, it creates uncertainty. Uncertainty is something the brain dislikes intensely because it cannot easily anticipate outcomes. This is why even small changes can trigger disproportionate emotional responses. You may feel anxious about speaking up, guilty about setting boundaries, or uneasy about trying something new, even though those actions align with your values. Your brain is not evaluating whether the change is good for you. It is reacting to the disruption of predictability. This predictability bias also explains why people often romanticize the past or cling to familiar environments, even when they were unhappy there. The known provides a sense of stability that the unknown cannot immediately offer. As a result, your brain may amplify doubts, minimize potential benefits, or focus obsessively on worst-case scenarios as a way to discourage movement. These mental narratives are not objective truths. They are protective strategies designed to keep you within established parameters. Recognizing this allows you to step back from your thoughts and see them as signals rather than commands. Instead of asking why you feel resistant, a more useful question becomes what your brain is trying to protect you from. Often, the answer is not actual danger, but the discomfort of effort, uncertainty, and identity disruption. When you understand this, resistance stops feeling like a personal failing and starts feeling like a predictable response you can work around rather than be controlled by. Another reason your brain hates change is because it is deeply shaped by past experiences, especially moments where change led to pain, failure, or loss. Your brain does not analyze these experiences in a rational, nuanced way. It stores them as emotional data. If you tried to change before and were criticized, rejected, embarrassed, or overwhelmed, your nervous system remembers that feeling more vividly than the lesson you learned. As a result, when you consider changing again, your brain anticipates the same outcome, even if the context is completely different. This anticipation triggers protective responses meant to prevent you from reliving that pain. You may notice a sudden surge of fear, self-doubt, or catastrophic thinking when you're on the edge of taking action. These reactions can feel irrational, but they are rooted in the brain's tendency to generalize from past threats. To your nervous system, similarity equals danger. Even a small resemblance to a previous failure can activate the same stress response. This is why change often feels emotionally heavier than it logically should. The brain is not evaluating the present moment in isolation. It is comparing it to stored memories and reacting accordingly. This process is largely unconscious, which makes it difficult to reason your way out of resistance. You may intellectually understand that this opportunity is different, that you are more capable now, that the risks are manageable, yet your body responds as if you were walking into the same old pain. This disconnect between logic and emotion can be deeply frustrating and can lead to self-judgment. You may tell yourself that you should be over this by now, that you should be stronger or more confident, but emotional memory does not operate on logic or timelines. It operates on association. Your brain's primary goal is to prevent harm, not to reassess old conclusions.
Because of this, it often overcorrects, choosing avoidance over possibility. This avoidance can be subtle. Instead of outright refusing change, your brain may push you toward over-preparation, endless planning, or waiting for the perfect moment. These behaviors feel productive, but they serve the same function as avoidance by delaying action. You may also experience self-sabotage, where you start strong but lose momentum once things become unfamiliar. This happens because your brain is attempting to pull you back to safety before the change becomes irreversible. The closer you get to real transformation, the stronger this internal resistance can become. Understanding this pattern is crucial because it reveals that fear is not a sign that you are incapable of change. It is a sign that change matters. The intensity of your resistance often correlates with the significance of what you are trying to alter. When you learn information rather than instruction, you can respond differently. Instead of retreating, you can slow down, ground yourself, and remind your nervous system that the present is not the past. This doesn't eliminate fear instantly, but it reduces its power. Over time, as you expose your brain to new experiences that do not result in the anticipated harm, it begins to update its predictions. This is how lasting change actually happens, not through forcing yourself to ignore fear, but through gently proving to your brain that growth does not automatically equal danger. The brain's resistance to change is also reinforced by its deep attachment to control, even when that control is illusory. Familiar routines, thoughts, and behaviors create the feeling that you know what to expect, and expectation reduces anxiety. Change disrupts this sense of control by introducing outcomes that cannot be fully predicted or managed. From the brain's perspective, uncertainty is more threatening than discomfort because it removes the ability to prepare. This is why people often stay in situations they actively dislike, jobs that drain them, relationships that limit them, habits that undermine their health, simply because the discomfort is known and therefore feels manageable. The brain prefers a predictable struggle over an unpredictable opportunity. When you contemplate change, your mind may flood with questions about what could go wrong, not because those outcomes are likely, but because anticipating them creates the illusion of control. Worry becomes a coping mechanism, a way to feel prepared for uncertainty. However, this constant mental rehearsal keeps your nervous system in a heightened state, making change feel even more overwhelming. Another aspect of control is the brain's reliance on immediate feedback. The human brain evolved to respond to short-term rewards and punishments, not long-term outcomes. Change, especially meaningful change, often requires enduring short-term discomfort without immediate payoff. When you stop a habit, set a boundary, or pursue a new path, the benefits are rarely instant. Instead, you may experience loneliness, awkwardness, or self-doubt before any positive results appear. Your brain interprets this delay as evidence that the change is not working, reinforcing the urge to revert. This is why motivation alone is rarely enough. Motivation is tied to emotion, and emotion fluctuates. When the initial excitement fades, the brain looks for relief, and relief is usually found in what is familiar. This creates a cycle where you repeatedly start and stop, reinforcing the belief that you can't follow through. Over time, this pattern can erode self-trust, making future change attempts even harder. But the problem is not your character. It is the mismatch between how the brain evaluates safety and how growth actually unfolds. The brain wants certainty, quick rewards, and minimal effort. Growth requires uncertainty, delayed gratification, and sustained discomfort. Until this mismatch is acknowledged, change will continue to feel like a battle. When you understand this, the goal shifts from forcing change to designing it in a way your brain can tolerate. This means creating structures that reduce uncertainty, breaking change into small, manageable steps, and focusing on consistency rather than intensity. It means expecting resistance instead of being surprised by it. When resistance appears, it is no longer a reason to quit. It is a signal that you are stepping outside familiar territory. By normalizing this discomfort, you remove its power to derail you. Gradually, as your brain experiences new patterns that do not lead to catastrophe, its need for control softens. The unfamiliar becomes less threatening, and the effort required to maintain change decreases. This is not because the brain suddenly loves change, but because it has learned that change does not automatically mean loss of safety. And that learning only happens through repeated, tolerable exposure to the unknown. What ultimately allows change to happen is not overpowering your brain, but teaching it that growth can coexist with safety. The brain does not need to be convinced through logic alone, it needs experience. Each time you take a small step toward change and survive the discomfort that follows, your nervous system updates its understanding of what is dangerous and what is tolerable. This is why sustainable change is often slow and unglamorous. It happens through repetition, not breakthroughs, through consistency, not intensity. When you approach change with patience instead of pressure, you create conditions where your brain can adapt rather than resist. You stop framing discomfort as failure and start seeing it as part of the process. This shift reduces the internal conflict that drains your energy and replaces it with a sense of collaboration with yourself. Over time, you learn how to support your nervous system through change by regulating stress, creating predictable routines around new behaviors, and allowing yourself rest rather than demanding constant progress. This self-support builds trust. The more your brain learns that you will not push it into overwhelming situations without care, the less it feels the need to protect you through avoidance. Eventually, the fear associated with change diminishes, not because the unknown disappears, but because your capacity to handle it grows. You begin to experience a quiet confidence rooted in self-trust rather than motivation. You know that resistance will show up, and you also know that it does not get the final say. In this way, change becomes less about forcing yourself into a new life and more about gradually allowing yourself to grow into one.